Well, welcome in, gang. Hopefully you can hear me. I promise sitting here live at Hidden Hills Golf Club is not necessarily what the new look Duval rundown is going to look like each and every week. We obviously will miss our buddy Gus Logue, in case you missed it. He has departed from 1010XL, still going to be providing great Jaguars coverage. We're so proud of Gus, but we're also so excited to continue to bring you even more inside the game, X's and O's here on Duval Rundown each and every week. I am, of course, Mia O'Brien. Thanks for everybody watching live on YouTube and X right now. This, of course, will be available on demand. Hope you guys are enjoying our new interface, my conversation with Frank Frangie forthcoming. If you do like it, be sure to subscribe to the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel. Leave us a comment, leave us a reply. If you hate it, if you want Gus Logue back, you can certainly also chime in with that as well. But again, Mia O'Brien here. We're live at Hidden Hills Golf Club, the site of the Guggen Open. If you listen to 1010XL on terrestrial radio on 92.5 FM, 1010 AM, wherever you get the 1010XL app, you, of course, are very familiar with the 18th annual Guggen, our golf tournament that we host each and every year. And so we are on site for that, which is why I'm coming at you live on this, the first day of phase 3 of the off-season workouts for your Jacksonville Jaguars in a ballroom at Hidden Hills. Shout out to our host at Hidden Hills for hosting us. Obviously, normally I'll be at the home studio or at 1010XL World Headquarters as we dive into a specific Jaguars topic every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the next few weeks. And then, of course, once the season gets going, we'll be providing you even more Duval rundown as we go through the course of the Jaguars 2025 season. Guggen this morning, but yes, around noontime, the Jaguars will hit the field for OTA number 1, 10 organized team activity practices permitted by the National Football League. OTA number 1 for your Jacksonville Jaguars is indeed here today on this fine Monday, May 19th. Liam Cohen will speak after practice. Grant Udinski, the first-year offense coordinator, also expected to speak. We will have a slew of one-on-one interviews coming right here to the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel. Look, ultimately, and I've said this on Helmets and Heels the last few weeks, and I know my colleagues have exhausted the point as well, and certainly our colleagues on the Jaguars in-house media team, I was catching up with listening to Huddle Up with Bucky Brooks this weekend, and they exhausted the point as well. There's not a whole heck of a lot that we can glean as media members, watching players, practicing a playbook, quite frankly, just learning where they need to be put in the best position to succeed. But ultimately, what we know you guys want is some sort of intel, some sort of, hey, who flashed, who didn't. I don't think you're going to be able to glean a whole heck of a lot in OTAs in terms of the trenches, which I know is priority number 1 for so many of you Jaguar fans. I do think with routes on air, you at the very least can start to see perhaps a more nuanced route running from some of these younger wide receivers. We'll get into that topic here on today's show. Perhaps you see some of these young DBs, a remodeled defensive back room in both the corner and the safety room for your Jacksonville Jaguars. Can we glean any insight into how they move? Are they going to be able to compete for starting spots? Those are some things that we'll be keeping an eye on here at OTAs. But there's obviously bigger picture storylines that go beyond the lines of the football field that we will see at the Miller Electric Center here today. And so for that conversation, my friend Frank Frangie joined me. This is a pre-recorded conversation, but I think all 5 storylines are still relevant here on this fine Monday morning. And so here is Frank Frangie and myself, the biggest storylines to watch for here at Jaguars OTAs today. It's the new look Duval rundown, but 2 familiar faces. Yes, Frank Frangie joins me now here on this Monday edition of Duval Rundown. The Jaguars will be on the field later today for OTA number 1. Frank, I know you are chomping at the bit.
Yeah, I am. By the way, the new graphics are good. Did you do those? Is that your graphics? They're very good.
Yes. Yep. So we're workshopping them like we've talked about. You know, we're right. Still exploring what Duval Rundown will look like in 2025. Much like the Jacksonville Jaguars are feeling out their roster, especially here in this offseason program. Frank, I've put together a list of my top 5 storylines at OTAs. I'm excited if they match, in your mind, what you believe the top 5 storylines questions are for Liam Cohen and James Gladstone in their first OTA offseason program. Number 1, I think we're on the same page with this one. It's perhaps the biggest storyline nationally when it comes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Where will Travis Hunter play? We heard Liam Cohen say last week the expectation is he will be integrated on the field into the defense a little bit more this first week of OTAs. I've had a lot of people try to come up with a ballpark number in terms of percentage of how much he'll play. 70-30 70% offense, 30% defense appears to be the prevailing thought nationally. What say you?
Yeah, I think so. I think I have a pretty good idea how they're going to do it. And I may be wrong. I'm just guessing. But my guess is he's an offensive player. I think he's one of the three receivers. I think the receivers are going to be Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, and De'Ami Brown, which they think's got a chance to be a really good grouping. So I think that's going to be the three receivers. My guess is he's going to play defense on get off the field downs, Mia. I think he's going to, on third down, he's on the field. In the red zone, I think he's on the field. When the Carolina game starts and Carolina and the Jags win the toss and defer, and the Panthers start at their own 25-yard line or 30, wherever they start, in my opinion, he's not on the field. If they drive the ball and all of a sudden it's 3rd and 7 from the Jaguars 42, I think he is on the field. So I think it's get off the field downs. I think it's red zone downs. And if you want to do a percentage, I think it'll wind up being that 70-30 you're talking about. Now, listen, I don't know that they totally know. You got to see what kind of load he can handle. You want to see how he takes in everything. He's got to learn the offense. Now he's had to learn the defense. But I would think in a perfect world, as they imagine this, it's going to be a lot of offense and defense when they need him.
And I think that more offense will actually serve him to eventually get to that level that I know Joel Klatt on Fox Sports, he has spent more time with Travis outside of probably everyone not named Gus Johnson. And that's because he calls games with Gus Johnson on Fox. And he, of course, has the Colorado tie. He's been very vocal that he believes this eventually will lead to a world in which Travis Hunter is playing every single down for the Jacksonville Jaguars, not this season, but at some point down the line. And I think by majoring in offense now, he'll start picking up more on tendencies of wide receivers that are in that upper echelon to not only improve, DBs that are in that upper echelon, that then he can apply to his own game on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. I think to his point, I think the amount of load can grow. I do believe that. Remember this too, when you've been, to Joel's point, I assume, Mia, when you've been in the league 3 years, you understand things better. You understand how guys are coming out of their routes. You understand how they're stacking receivers on one side and what that means. You understand what the route tree is. No cornerback that comes into the league knows that as well today as he's going to know it in year 3. So I think when you understand how the league works a little bit, that'll help. But I still think remember now, nobody plays every down. No receiver plays every down. Even the great receivers, they're out of the game some. That's a rotate. Unlike offensive linemen and quarterbacks who play every play, everybody else rotates in and out. Those are the two positions that don't. So, yeah, I would think he'll play more as he goes along. But again, I think he's here to be a receiver and a defensive back when needed.
Staying on the offensive side of the ball, top 2 storyline for me. Number 2, Trevor Lawrence's connection with not only the new targets the Jacksonville Jaguars have brought in, but certainly his health, as well as his chemistry with Brian Thomas Jr., who a lot of talking heads nationally, Frank, have been quick to note. Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence played just 9 games together. And of course, Brian Thomas Jr. didn't emerge as the marquee piece in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense until probably around week 6, week 7. What say you about the connection between Trevor and this new group of wide receivers and tight ends for that matter?
Yeah, the next step for Trevor is a big storyline. That's exactly right. Whether it's with the receivers, whether it's checkdowns, whether it's learning Liam's offense, the next step for Trevor is the most important storyline with his football team. He's entering year 5. Quarterbacks, I really believe this, Mia, are at their best years 5 through 10 in the National Football League. Before that, they've got to learn. Patrick Mahomes got there a little earlier. Some guys do. But most guys, years 5 through 10 in the league is when they're at their best. By 11 or 12, they're a little bit old. Years 3 or 4, they don't understand the league yet. Well, he's entering that stretch. Now, I think years 5 through 10 are good for him. And look, here's a reality. And we're not just being homers here. Liam Cohen unlocked something with Baker Mayfield last year that had not been unlocked before. Part of that was Baker's maturity, but part of it was what Liam had him doing. And I'll say this too. I think of every offensive coordinator says we got to run the ball. We got to run the ball. We got to run the ball. Well, Liam has proven it. He proved it at Kentucky when he was calling plays. He proved it last year in Tampa Bay when he was calling plays, that nothing works unless you run the ball first. That's why they like their 2 running backs. That's why they drafted a running back who I think really is going to get in play for them. That's why they did everything they could to rebuild. My gosh, they brought in 5 offensive linemen between free agency and the draft. So I think running the ball, Liam Cohen's offense, Trevor now entering year 5, will aid all that. But Trevor taking the next step is a gigantic storyline for this team.
So in my notes, I have Travis Hunter storyline number 1, Trevor Lawrence storyline number 2. I had defensive line 3, but for continuity's sake, let's stay with that thought. Let's stay with the offensive line, which I have at 4. Our friend Mark Long of the Associated Press joined the boys on XL Primetime last week at the ACC meetings and very directly addressed how the Jaguars may line up their players during both the offseason program and into training camp. Look, we can't comment on what we see out at OTA number 1 today or throughout the offseason program, who's on the first, second, or third team. But what do you make of this notion of the Jaguars potentially jumbling the depth chart and saying, we're going to try this guy with that guy and this guy with that guy in order to light a fire underneath the entrenched starters?
For the last 11 years, I've sat next to Tony Baselli in a broadcast booth, and nothing drove him crazy more than the offensive line not being physical enough. I can tell you that. That's not a secret. He said it every broadcast, right? So, and I know him, and I know him off air, and these were dinners before the broadcast. These were conversations afterwards. Nothing drove him more crazy. So along with James Gladstone and Liam, I promise you, one of the most important storylines to them is making that offensive line more physical. I said it a minute ago. They signed 4 offensive linemen in free agency and then drafted a guy that they think will compete. That's 5 new offensive linemen to compete with some pretty good guys who are coming back. Walker Little and Anton Harrison are incumbent starters. Ezra Cleveland's an incumbent starter. So they really want competition there. I can tell you that. I think you're going to see Fred Johnson play on both sides. I think you're going to see some guys play tackle guard. I think you're going to see Wyatt Milam given every opportunity to win the left guard spot. I think you're going to see Ezra Cleveland battle to hold that spot. I think competition along the offensive front, to Mark's point, is one of the real storylines that they're talking about in that building. In fact, I can tell you they're talking about it in the building. That is one of the most important things, is having those 5 guys, the best 5 guys. And it's going to be a war, man, between OTAs and mini camp and preseason games and joint practices, if they decide to have those. It's going to be a battle to see which 5 guys survive, man. And I think it's one of the most, I think that's a very high storyline. So I think Mark's right. Everybody's playing everywhere until they find the best 5.
I'm glad you brought up Fred Johnson playing on both sides, because I think there's a lot of folks in Jacksonville who have been very quick to put Walker Little on the hot seat. But equally as hot, I would say, is the seat for Anton Harrison, as I've reported and I've commented on. Look, it's not that they don't like Anton. It's not that they're trying to jettison him away. But correct me if I'm wrong, this is a very big year for Anton to prove that he's going to go out and he's going to win this job, and that he can go 125% each and every day.
Yeah, I think that's the case with all 5 spots. I won't single out Anton any more than the rest of them. I think all 5 guys, and I even mean Hainsey and McCarry, who we all expect will start. I expect Hainsey will be their center. I expect McCarry will be their right guard. But I think they got to win it too, man. I think everybody's been told this is, you got to prove it. So does Anton have to prove some things? He's a first-round draft pick. Does he have to prove he deserves it? Yeah, he does. Walker Little's got to prove he can deserve left tackle. Again, I love that, by the way. Look, I don't think there's a lot of competition at receiver. I think the receivers are Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, and De'Ami Brown. I think Parker Washington's going to be their 4th guy. I don't think there's a lot of competition at quarterback. I think we know who the guy is. I don't think there's a lot of competition at middle linebacker or the 2 defensive ends. I don't think there's a lot of competition at the 1 cornerback spot with Tyson Campbell. You see my point? I think there's a lot of spots we know who they are. But I think on that offensive front, all 5 guys are going to fight to win those jobs. I really believe that.
Let's flip to the other side of the trenches for storyline number 4, defensive line. Look, I don't want to judge my expectations for this defensive front based off what I saw at a unpadded practice for 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes at rookie minicamp. But certainly, James Gladstone has been vocal about bringing in young guys, not putting free agent veterans in their way, and ensuring that there is a quick path to get those young players onto the grass. Well, yes, I believe he also was talking about Mason Smith, Jordan Jefferson, the second-year defensive lineman out of LSU. At the same time, Frank, this looked like, to me, at least the crop that I saw at rookie minicamp a week and a half ago, that looked like an undersized interior defensive line group that, well, yes, the hope is that they're going to push the current incumbents. I'm very fascinated to see how things shake out and if we believe the Jaguars may need to continue to add along that defensive front.
Yeah, I don't know that you can tell, at least that I can't tell anything at one day of a mini camp. My friend Jeff Lagerman calls it the underwear Olympics. I don't know if you can tell a whole lot there. But look, the one surprise I had is that they didn't add more in the interior of the defensive line. And that tells me they like Mason Smith and Tyler Lacey and Jordan Jefferson. They believe Devon Hamilton can bounce back. They think there's something left with Eric Armstead. That's the one. And listen, you can't fix everything in one off season, right? But that's the one spot I thought we might see a guy or two, either in the draft or in free agency. And we didn't see a lot. I mean, we really didn't. So they trust those guys. That's the question. I don't know what's left out there to go get either. I think guys you pick up now are unlikely to come in here and start. And that's not a Jaguar anybody thing, right? So I don't know that you can go find a lot of guys. So that's the spot. The one spot that, okay, Mason Smith and Tyler Lacey and Jordan Jefferson and Devon and Eric and whoever else, we are counting on you because that's the one area we didn't really address in the player acquisition period, either the draft or free agency. So yeah, I'm interested. I'm interested. I don't know what to think. I can tell you, our mutual friend Matt Moscona, who we talk to a lot, really likes Jordan Jefferson and Mason Smith. Jordan Jefferson, Matt told me, and I probably told you too, was their best defensive lineman that year. Mason Smith's the highest recruited defensive lineman they've ever signed at LSU. So there's something there. But the Jags, yeah, those five guys have to step up and play because they didn't do much to change that part of their team.
Fifth and final storyline. I promised we would circle back to Travis Hunter at some point. You and I have both been very vocal, and certainly I've reported it, Frank, that the remodeling of the defensive back room, both at the corner position and at safety, was by design. That this was another group that, much like the offensive line, the new administration deemed, hey, we need to create more competition and do a little bit of remodeling here. The question will be, number one, did they do enough? Number two, how do they line up? And look, opening day against the Carolina Panthers is still months away, but I'm fascinated to see what this lineup is going to look like. And certainly they'll change pieces with every practice and with every down, but I'm fascinated to see if the Jaguars added too many chess pieces and maybe not enough guys in the back end who specifically are great at one thing.
If I had to guess, Tyson Campbell obviously is going to start at one side. I would guess Jordan Lewis is the nickel and Jarian Jones gets a chance to be the other outside corner. I would guess that obviously the Eric Murray is going to be a starter at safety because they brought him here to do that. And I think they would love Caleb Ransaw to win that other safety job. Now, I think they've got Andrew Wingard, who I love because I think he brings so much. Darnell Savage is a guy that in the right position is a good football player. But I would guess that Ransaw is going to have every chance to win that job. And he's got to win it. I think he's going to have every chance. So I mentioned everybody but Travis Hunter. My guess is when they use Travis Hunter, I'm guessing here he would be an outside corner. Does that mean Jarian Jones moves inside? Does that mean they're doing it in dime packaging? But I would guess when Travis Hunter comes in, and again, in fairness, nobody knows. I don't think they know yet. But I would guess if you really pulled Anthony Campanile aside and said, what are you guessing? My guess would be it would look something like that when the game starts. And we'll see. Some guys might be. Monteric Brown might go beat out somebody, right? Who knows what's going to wind up happening when they all play. But I would guess it's going to seem – I think that's what we're all kind of imagining. And I would guess it's not going to veer very far from that. Travis Hunter, I'll say it again, in my opinion, he's going to be in there on third downs. He's going to be in there in the red zone. He's going to be in there on critical get off the field downs. And that might grow as it goes. But that's how I think the season's going to begin.
A lot of mixing and matching expected at OTA number 1 this afternoon and throughout the OTA process, as well as training camp, because, hey, there's a whole heck of a lot of new, a lot of let's roll the ball out and let's see who emerges and who steps up. And we're looking forward to each and every bit of it. Frank, thanks so much for joining us. Do you want to do this again every Monday? It sounds kind of fun.
Here. I know you know where to find me. I'm here. Let's do this every Monday. I'm happy to do it.
Hey, listen, we both had these nice home studios designed. We might as well put them to use. Frank, thanks so much for hopping on.
Okay, man. Thank you.
Unmute it. Thanks so much to Frank Frangie again for joining us. That was previously recorded because in case you did join us a little bit late, I am live right now at Hidden Hills Golf Club, the site of the Guggen Open. Of course, won't be here for most Duval rundowns, needless to say. We're very excited to have the Guggen Open for so many of our wonderful listeners and our clients here at 1010XL today. But don't worry, we'll be back in the home studio on Wednesday. Before we get out of here, let's address a little bit of mailbag. Let's address a little bit of the conversation I had with the voice of your Jacksonville Jaguars, Frank Frangie. I put out a call, put out the bat signal for some Monday mailbag from you guys, and of course, you delivered. Let's start with this one. This is from Greg. How many offensive linemen will the Jaguars keep on their 53-man roster? 9, 10, who is left off? Before Gus Logue departed 1010XL, he and I did go through our way too early 53-man roster predictions. You can check that out on demand on the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel or the 1010XL podcast network. I have the Jaguars with 10 offensive linemen on their 53-man roster, much like they have done each of the last 3 years. However, that 10th lineman is going to be inactive basically the whole season. I currently have Jonah Monheim, the 7th-round center out of USC, in that 10th spot. But again, he would be a developmental center. You would need someone else backing up Robert Hainsey at that center spot, whether that's Luke Fortner, whether that's a combination of various swing tackle players, if they can have multiple position versatility. Certainly Patrick McCarry has 5-position versatility, even though I have him penciled in as the right guard like I know so many do. So I have it at 10 in terms of who gets left off. Obviously, there is a conversation to be had about Luke Fortner, once upon a time a 3rd-round pick of the previous regime. Prior to being selected by the Jacksonville Jaguars, he, of course, was starring at Kentucky, was a 2-time captain with Liam Cohen as his offensive coordinator, and that was when he experienced his most success at Kentucky. And so I think it's going to be an interesting conversation as far as Fortner goes. Cole Van Lanen was a restricted free agent this past offseason, had an opportunity to sign with the Seattle Seahawks, ultimately made the decision to come back here to Jacksonville to compete for that swing tackle position. He has versatility as well, much like Tuma Idoga, who the Jaguars signed this offseason, in that he can play guard or tackle. You heard Frank mention Fred Johnson, how he can play left and right tackle. Let's get to one more in the mailbag, though, because I feel like this one kind of lends itself to this conversation. Want to make sure we get to the right one. Yes, that would be Jonathan with our number 3 mailbag question. Any current players on the roster in jeopardy of being traded before training camp begins? I would not say before training camp begins, Jonathan, but going back to the original mailbag, the first mailbag question about the offensive line. Look, there's a lot of smoke about this idea of could Ezra Cleveland be a trade candidate if Wyatt Milam, the 3rd-round pick out of West Virginia, does win that starting left guard job. I am not going to tell you today on May the 19th that Wyatt Milam is winning that job. I would argue Ezra Cleveland is a above average starter in the National Football League. And why would you jettison good talent when, quite frankly, last year the critique of your roster was that you did not have enough talent on this roster? And so I think it's going to be fascinating to see. The same can certainly go with the conversation regarding Travis Etienne and whether or not he's a candidate to be traded at some point this season. I think that this new administration recognizes that if you have talented pieces, why would you trade them away? Yes, certainly James Gladstone made it clear, if only along the defensive line, they want those rookies to get an opportunity to play early. They don't want to have anyone standing in the way. At the same time, I think that there is something to be said of you can't have too many good running backs. You can't have too many good offensive linemen. Injuries happen along the trenches. And so that's where I'm fascinated to see if anyone's going to get dealt. I don't think it would be before the first week of the season, because I think that this is an administration that wants to go through training camp. They want everyone to have a fair shake at it before they ultimately make some of those roster decisions. I see Jonathan included Walker Little and Anton Harrison here in the mailbag question. Look, I don't know what to tell you guys outside of, in my estimation and from what I've been told, well, yes, those two are going to be pushed during training camp. And someone actually commented on this while Frank joined the show earlier. This idea of they're trying to run off Walker Little, they're trying to run off Anton Harrison, I really don't know where it's coming from. I don't think putting in the time, the effort is really a question mark for either of those two players. I think especially with Walker Little, he proved last year, well, yes, Cam Robinson was your starting left tackle. That was largely because of the dollar sign attached to his name. He proved in the offseason program to the previous administration that he deserved an opportunity to start. Ultimately, the decision was made to start Cam Robinson because of how much money he was due. And they had to find a way to get Walker Little onto the field. And so they had to trade Cam Robinson away. I think with Anton, what we all have to remember is that he was drafted at 21 years old and 2 months. He turned 21 in February prior to being drafted 28th overall that April. He is still a very young player. There was a lot of dysfunction in his second year in the National Football League. You could make the argument there was a lot of dysfunction in his first year with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so if that is to be the case, what he needs this year, why it's such a critical year for Anton, is to create stability around him and for him to truly learn what it means to be a pro's pro. Social commented earlier during our conversation with Frank Frangie that Walker Little finished highly rated by PFF at the end of the year. I had a couple sources note that to me as well. Social, this idea of he actually was rated out as one of the best run blockers in the AFC, let alone on the Jacksonville Jaguars roster last year. And so this idea of, well, he's just a dancing bear and he's just a pass blocker, is that actually well-founded? That's going to be a conversation one way or another, because I know there's some of you out there who have kind of made your decision about how you feel about Walker Little, how you feel about Anton Harrison. I believe this administration is going to give everybody a fair shake. That's why I think this idea of, hey, maybe we're going to work you at the 2s, the 3s. There is no depth chart, especially here during the offseason program. I think that's sending the right message from this administration that we are tied to no one. The only person we are tied to, arguably, is Trevor Lawrence. Outside of that, and maybe Brian Thomas Jr. Outside of that, anyone could come in here and prove to us that I should be a starter. I should have a fair shake at this thing. Let's continue this week's Monday mailbag. This is from Nick. How does this staff view Parker Washington? I personally think he will turn some heads this year. Nick, I will tell you this full-heartedly. Parker Washington is in their top 4 of their wide receivers. There's a reason that this team felt comfortable jettisoning Gabe Davis away. It was because Parker Washington was firmly ahead of the 5th-year, I guess now 6th-year veteran Gabe will be on the depth chart. And so that's a credit to a 6th-round rookie once upon a time in Parker. The fact that he constantly went to Chad Hall, the now former wide receivers coach, and said, hey, I want the opportunity to flex outside. I want to showcase that I can play all 3 wide receiver spots. Do I believe he'll play all 3 wide receiver spots? No. I think his ability as a returner is too valuable. I think by drafting Travis Hunter and the fact that he will major on offense and at the wide receiver position, I think that behooves this team as a whole, because now you can put Parker Washington on punt return, kick return duty, whatever you choose to do, and you can feel confident that you're not losing one of your top 3 wide receivers, even if he is in that 4th spot. And I've heard from people around the league that, some people, maybe myself included, which I kind of find hilarious because I've championed Parker Washington since he got here and was among those who in multiple interviews last year noted that he has the ability to flex outside, even if it's only at that quote unquote Christian Kirk level, where that's not to say he's an elite X or Z receiver, but he can play it for you in a pinch. But this notion that maybe I was a bit more critical on his ability to contribute to this roster early and often, I will just simply say once again, he is firmly in their top 4 wide receivers. There was never a question of how far ahead he was comparatively to Gabe Davis, and that he was going to be a fixture in the rotation at the wide receiver position. Let's hit a couple more. This one is from DI. Are you hearing the Trey Hendrickson rumors floating around the Jags organization? Yes, as I noted at the end of Helmets and Heels, I believe that was on Friday or Thursday, DI. Yes, I received a call the night before regarding a potential phone call that could have been made by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I would argue for me, I will say it's too early to go down that road of, oh my goodness, he's coming to Jacksonville. And I will just tell you that I think it's good practice by the general manager that he is making phone calls one way or another, because that means you're paying attention to the rest of the league. And perhaps that's a low bar to clear for some, but I think it's important. There were a couple other teams that were mentioned to me. I won't share those here because, again, I still think it's too early to tell in terms of what the Cincinnati Bengals will do, if Trey Hendrickson will be moved or not. But I appreciate that, if only according to one source, And certainly there's other people out there running with it on the internet. But I will just tell you that according to one source, the Jaguars were one of 4 or 5 teams that did inquire about Trey Hendrickson. That doesn't mean he's coming here. But I do think it's interesting that, and it's encouraging, I should say, even more so than interesting. It's encouraging that James Gladstone is making those phone calls, is paying attention to everything that's going on in the National Football League. Now, at the same time, I would like to inquire about making, $10 million myself. Does that mean that I'm going to get $10 million? Probably not, sadly, but maybe some of you in the chat could possibly make that one happen. That would be great. Just continue to keep subscribing to the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel. Final one of this Monday mailbag. Thanks so much again to everybody for joining us. We'll hit some of your comments here before we get out of here on this Monday edition of Duval Rundown. This is from Ryan. How is the locker room buying into the new culture that is being built? I would argue, again, kind of like in the same vein as it's encouraging that James Gladstone is picking up the phone and trying to gather intel, and perhaps that's a low bar to clear. I would argue that when it comes to the locker room, from what I've been told, and again, today is the first day of phase 3 of the offseason program. So these players have, yes, had about a month and a half with the new administration and the new staff, but not necessarily to the full extent as they will here in the next 3 weeks. There's encouraging returns from everyone who I've talked to pretty much across the board. At the same time, I think that the biggest point that I can share is that the open and honest lines of communication that this young roster, because it is still a young roster. I know Eric Armstead and a couple others have maybe inflated that median average age from what it was a few years ago. And certainly some other players are getting a little bit older, myself included. But this idea of we live in a Google generation. At 32 years old, I'm part of that Google generation. The players on the Jaguars roster that are 21 and 22 are certainly part of that generation. This idea of they want to be able to go to their coaches, whether that's the head coach, their assistant coach, strength and conditioning. They want to be able to go to that person's office and have an open and honest conversation and not be dismissed, not be, this is what we're doing, take it or leave it. That is a philosophical shift from the previous administration. I think it's also a philosophical shift from maybe what 10, 20 years ago, what an NFL locker room and an NFL facility reflected. And those young players are receiving that one-on-one open line of communication that they weren't previously. Now, as Liam Cohen, I'm sure, would tell you, and I believe the coordinators here in Jacksonville, the assistant coaches would tell you, they have to prove that that line of communication is open each and every day and that they can show up and be the same guy each and every day. But the early returns, this is a group that wants to learn, and this is a staff that wants to teach. And I think that's very, very encouraging. That's so far so good in that regards. Let's hit a couple of your comments before we get on out of here. Appreciate everybody joining us here on this Monday edition of Duval Rundown. Again, we will certainly be bringing you as much as we possibly can here these next few weeks of the OTA period. We'll have our full lineup for the fall revealed later this summer. Let's get to a couple of your comments. This one is from Jason. I forgot Ethan Downs. I feel like he's got that. You've got as good an undrafted free agent group as you can ask for. Ethan Downs, the defensive end out of Oklahoma. Yes, I know I noted with Frank Frangie earlier in the show that I felt like this was a undersized, undrafted free agent defensive lineman group because the Jaguars, outside of Jalen McLeod, the off-ball hybrid linebacker, the buck linebacker, if you may, they did not draft any defensive linemen. I felt like they looked a little bit more undersized. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. If you believe in Mason Smith, if you believe, as Frank noted, our friend Matt Moscona at 104.5 in Baton Rouge believes in Jordan Jefferson, who put up the most bench reps of any defensive lineman at the NFL Combine in 2024. If you believe Devon Hamilton is fully healthy and they can be run pluggers, then that frees you up to say, okay, the area of our defensive line we need to improve is depth along the edge behind 41 and 44. Maybe because we want to be multiple, at least from what Anthony Campanelli has said in his limited availability so far since arriving in Jacksonville. If you're going to be multiple, if you do shift to a 3-4 front, then you're playing those two at outside linebacker, Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker. And so then who are you playing at a true defensive end at a 5 technique? Maybe that's where some of these quote-unquote undersized guys like Ethan Downs, or Jason also noted Danny Strigow out of Minnesota, who unfortunately was not at rookie minicamp because he was in a wedding, but he will be back here this week by all accounts. Maybe that's where they factor into this. Certainly Eli Mostert of North Dakota State has been a name that I've thrown out there, someone who was an FCS All-American, has the ability to push the pocket from the interior. Again, a bit undersized, but once upon a time, this was a GM, then director of scouting strategy, or I guess then he was still technically a college coach. But James Gladstone comes from a place in the Los Angeles Rams that banked on an undersized interior pass rusher in Aaron Donald once upon a time. And here we are where he is destined to be a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Appreciate you guys for hopping on this Monday edition of Duval Rundown. I will be back on Wednesday with the embedded and shredded Hayes Carlyon. We're going to do a little power ranking when it comes to the National Football League as a whole, but also the Jaguars' 2025 opponents, not just the teams themselves. We're going to talk coaches. We're going to talk players. Everybody loves power rankings this time of the year. It's May. We want any semblance of football that we can get. Appreciate everybody hopping on. Of course, this episode will be available on demand on the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel, as well as the 1010XL Podcast Network. Like, subscribe, tell your friends. We ain't going anywhere. Duval Rundown rolls on. We will catch you on Wednesday.